Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our research presentation. Today, we would like to present on researching English language part-time university lecturer voices during ERT, or emergency remote teaching. That is quite a mouthful for a title. Perhaps the most important word in that title, though, is voices. For this area of research addresses an area that is in dire need in the research, that of the voices of part-time university lecturers. We are Colin, Skeates, Wendy, Gough, Snyder, and Chiyuki, Yanase. Next, Wendy's going to talk about the overview of this presentation.
So this is a general outline of the presentation that we are doing today. We will start with me explaining about what we did and why we did it, and the background, and then Bill, Colin, and Chiyuki will discuss relationships with universities, other teachers, and self. And finally, we will talk about the implications and ongoing research. So the first thing, to give a little bit of background, the timing of ERT in Japan. So in February, MEXT suddenly requested the closing of schools below the university level. This is an important thing to note because it shows that this was a sudden closing and it happened in late February, just 1 month before the end of the school year in Japan. And then next, on March 6th, Waseda University was the first university to decide to conduct classes online. Keep in mind, the school year in Japan begins on April 1st. So we are looking at a very short time frame from schools to make a move from regular face-to-face classes to completely online. Then, a couple of weeks later, in mid-March, other universities began announcing revised plans for the spring semester. Began is very important here because some universities were not announcing that they were going online until late March or even early April, and other universities were changing their minds about the method of instruction throughout the spring semester. This caused a lot of issues, both on the institutional level, but also for the teachers who were expected to teach the classes. So now I will explain what we did and why we did it. So we surveyed part-time university teachers about their well-being during ERT. And we chose to look only at people who worked part-time or what could be considered part-time full-time. This means people who are working as adjunct or part-time professors, generally at more than one university to make up their living. And this is an important aspect to research because in the literature, we found some research about faculty development, but nothing specifically about part-time teachers. And we are interested to know how well part-time teachers are included in what's happening at universities. And we also wanted to know how people responded to ERT and how they coped with the situation, both at the beginning of the semester when the decisions were being made and also throughout the entire spring semester. Also, the kinds of support that they received institutionally, maybe professionally or socially, or maybe even from their families or at home. So now I will explain our initial survey. At the end of April and early May, our research team compiled a survey that we sent out through social media seeking part-time university teachers to respond. This survey included general demographic questions, things like how long people had been working at universities, how many universities they worked for, gender, all of those basic questions that can give us a sense of the community that we were looking at. We also asked about training and support from universities. And this is connected to the kind of lack of literature on training and support in general, but specifically related to part-time teachers. And then finally, the participants were asked to complete the IPANAS SF short form survey, which measures mood and emotion. So after this initial survey was conducted between May 4th and 16th, we did initial coding for affective, descriptive, and emotion coding. Next, Bill, Colin, and Chiyuki are going to discuss some of our initial results.
Hello. I'm going to talk about the results from our teachers regarding their relationships with the universities that they worked for. And this was actually probably the biggest category because we're looking at the initial survey data. This was before teaching started, before teachers were working with students. And so the relationship with the university was the most immediate thing on their minds. And our results fell into 4 categories: inadequate support and training, communication and language issues with their universities, indecisiveness and short notice of changes provided by universities, and finally, issues of compensation and job security. Many of the teachers entered ERT unprepared to teach online, and they needed to get up to speed quickly. And many of them expressed frustration with the inadequacy of the training provided by their universities and the limited support that they received in making the transition from teaching face-to-face to teaching online. And what you're going to see here with all these slides is a representative quote from a teacher drawn from our data set. While the universities were providing less than sufficient support, they were communicating a lot with teachers, often flooding them with emails. And for teachers whose literacy skills in Japanese weren't all that strong, often these emails were written in formal bureaucratic Japanese, which made them really difficult to read. And so teachers had to spend a lot of time going through emails to try and figure out what was going on at their university. One of the reasons why teachers were getting hit with a flood of emails was because universities kept changing their minds about what to do. In defense of the universities, this was often because they discovered issues as they responded to emergency remote teaching. Security issues with different platforms, problems for students who couldn't return to Japan. And so they did have to make changes, but teachers often felt like these changes were thrust upon them at the last minute. A big issue for part-time teachers was a question of compensation. These are contract workers and they're paid actually a very limited wage. And they often felt that the schools were providing better support to full-time teachers and to students in order to meet the additional costs that emergency remote teaching imposed. Many teachers had to buy new computers, had to set up home offices, and even just increased electricity bills. And they weren't getting any kind of compensation from their universities for this. And finally, for part-time teachers, because they are contract workers and they can simply be not renewed when contracts end, job security is a huge issue. They don't have any real protections against universities deciding, oh, we don't need so many teachers anymore. And so there was a lot of teachers expressing concerns about the lack of job security that they had. And now I'll turn things over to Colin to talk about the relationship between teachers and other teachers.
Many of the categories are interrelated, and the idea of support, which Bill has already talked about, was something that was quite a significant part of relationship that part-time teachers had with other teachers. More specifically, what was interesting was how some teachers required support. They needed, they just felt like they were not able to do their job. They didn't have the tools, they didn't feel comfortable with the tools that the universities were providing them. For many, they had to learn many different systems in a very short period of time. This caused a lot of stress. On the other hand, and so they communicated this to us, but on the other hand, there were also part-time teachers that were supporting other part-time teachers. This was one of the, perhaps one of the better parts of our research, where we found a community developing. Now, this is particularly important for those institutions that want to foster faculty development. We know that in faculty development from research from outside of Japan, that faculty development is best served when the training that is being provided is focused on what teachers need. So there's an immediacy for it. And there is an opportunity to research that faculty development, that it allows teachers to, through researching, to go deeper. For a lot of these teachers building this community, this is what happened. They were able to reach out to other teachers and support and get support from each other. Now, this is only support from both perspectives, relationships between one teacher and another, but there is also the relationship with the self, which is what Chiyuki Yanase is going to talk about next.
Okay, so many teachers realize that their position is very vulnerable. And as Dr. Brown says, what makes you vulnerable makes you beautiful. That's one of our occupations that explains our occupations. Next one. So this is Kateman's quote, and what is the vulnerability and what is our, it explains what is our occupation is. Okay, next one is the teacher's voice. So in spite of very vulnerable positions and the current very stressful situations, a teacher found something, it opens the possibilities. One is Colin mentioned, the possibility to connect with others. And another one is possibility to develop as a professional teacher. So next one is, okay. So it says that some of the teachers says that this is a really huge learning curve. However, they develop their new skills of sets of skills. Okay, next one is, so this is another one, another voice of the teacher says that it opens the developing opportunity to develop the new skills. So then next one is Wendy will talk about the implications of our project.
The first two implications are from the institution side. So institutions need to provide more inclusion of part-time teachers. This means making more effort to provide information to teachers and providing it in a language that is easy for them to understand. It also means giving part-time teachers the opportunity to express what they feel they need from the institution, so they feel like they're more part of the team and not just some afterthought on the institution side. Also, connected to that, institutions need to develop faculty development programs that cater to teachers' needs. Instead of someone at the top deciding this is what we think the teachers need, they need to be asking the part-time teachers what can be done on the institutional level to help them do their jobs more smoothly, whether it's training, whether it's just sessions to share ideas, whether it's class observations and feedback. The institutions really need to do more to focus on teacher needs and not just what somebody perceives they need who is not connected. And the second set of implications is from the teacher side. Teachers need to develop greater solidarity both inside and outside their institutions. So maybe, for example, we can't do it right now, but in normal times, teachers might, talk a lot in the teacher's room. Perhaps now that we're stuck in this online situation, teachers can find ways to connect with each other online just to talk about their classes and talk about what's going well or not going well. And outside of their institutions, they can reach out to groups on social media. For example, we saw in the spring semester of 2020, the Online Teaching Japan group suddenly formed, and it's a group that consists of teachers working full-time and part-time throughout Japan who are supporting each other and making up for gaps in what the universities are giving to the teachers. And finally, teachers need to embrace being vulnerable. That sounds very scary, but when we embrace being vulnerable, we can reflect on what's going on in our situation and how we can do things to learn or make it better. And this leads to greater professionalism.
And now I'm going to wrap up our presentation by talking about what we're doing with our data and how we're continuing to research. This presentation has reported results from the initial survey. We collected surveys every week over the entire semester and are continuing to survey teachers into the fall semester. So we're going to keep looking at how teacher well-being changed over the course of the initial spring semester and even into the fall semester. We're writing up what we presented here into a paper on Japan-based part-time instructors' initial emotional response to ERT. And we hope to have that out for publication shortly. And finally, one of the things that we learned from our survey design is that we actually didn't know as much as we thought about the technology issues that teachers would face. Many things came up that we simply hadn't anticipated. And so we've started to work on trying to understand how the technology issues relate to the teacher situations. And we're using TPAC to chart issues arising from ERT in another paper. And with that, I'd like to close our presentation and say thank you all for listening, and we look forward to hearing from you in the comments.